welcome back to the Positive Youth Development Podcast. Today we're talking about one of the biggest misconceptions about youth work, the idea that we already do PYD, Positive Youth Development. But as many of us have learned, PYD is not a one-time training. It's not a slide deck. It's not a set of activities. It's intentional, consistent interactions. And if we want youth to experience that, our staff need it from our leadership first. So I'm excited to have Kaylene Shake, the Director of After School and Camp at the Davis YMCA branch, here today. And she's been carving out a thoughtful, strategic approach to embedding PYD into her daily practice and her staff development. So we're going to explore what that looks like, what sparked that strategy, and how it's shaping up. But first, let's break the ice, Kaylene. Thank you for joining us. You're very welcome. Before we dig deep into your PYD strategy, which Super 6 practice do you think matches your energy today? Engage authentically, promote peer bonds, challenge growth, share power, manage goals, expand interests?
Definitely challenge growth this morning, definitely being pushed out of my comfort zone doing this podcast, but I'm excited to be here.
Well, we are excited to have you. Okay, let's build on that. Spark and strategy. You've been incredibly intentional this year about creating a PYD implementation strategy for your after-school programs. What has sparked that? Or where was the moment you realized we need a clear, intentional approach to this?
Yeah, at all of our before school trainings and our mid-year trainings, we do a PYD topic and we do a little training on that. But during the course of the year, like PYD just sort of falls off. And so we really wanted to make it intentional and really keep it in front of everyone's faces. So that's where I realized the opportunity was all of our staff have prep time where there's no kids yet. It's just them getting all their materials and curriculum ready. So I thought, why not spend some of that time just really focusing on PYD with micro learnings, watching little videos, going over resources, and then being able to implement it once the bell rings when the kids come.
Talk me through how you developed this plan, what it looks like, how you're going to execute it. Tell me more.
Yeah. So this focus calendar, it's basically one Super 6 element is focused on for 3 weeks. So every single day, Monday through Friday, I have a calendar that either has like links or the printed resources. And once they come into site, the site supervisor is in charge of rolling it out and really just putting it in front of the staff's faces. And they're going to load up the video. They're going to have debrief questions. How does this video, some of them are movie clips. So like, how does this relate to expanding interest? How can we implement this in our program today? Some of them are just resources that I printed from the website, like the 4-H greeting or the weekly intentions poster, and really focusing on that. And then some of them are micro practices. So warm goodbyes. So like we're really intentionally focusing on the warm goodbyes Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week to really absorb it and make it a natural practice of ours.
When did the light bulb moment go off for you that the training and the understanding wasn't enough, that you needed a specific carved out strategy where you're really outlining what that practice needs to be for that day or the focus of the day or the intention for the week? When did that dawn on you that that's what you needed to do to move from that training to start building culture?
Yeah. A lot of our staff, they hear PYD and they hear all the Super 6 elements and they don't really know how to break it down and make it apply in our work. When they're hearing expanding interest, they're not thinking of how we can do that in our program. So that's when I really took that time to think of different examples and practices and ways that are manageable and easy ways to start in our program so that they don't have to do the thinking, that they just have to be intentional and take that and apply it once the kids come. And I think that's really helped them so far. And some of them too, they're like, oh, I already do this. But for them, they weren't able to understand that some of the things they were already doing was PYD, because when they just hear PYD, it's this great big concept to them. So really helping them break it down and make it more understandable for them. That's when all this focus calendar came to be.
I love that. And one of the the main identified issues that I observe a lot of the times is that we are not intentional with our warm hellos and warm goodbyes. We're checking kids in, we're saying hi, we're like logging them for licensing and protocol, but we're really not creating that sense of belonging. And that's where we can really start with a warm hello or a warm goodbye. So I love it. It's you're highlighting to staff too that it can be really small actions that build up over time that will create this environment. And yes, we do some of these, but it's the consistency that is required to build that culture. That is awesome. What do you hope is the intended outcome once you complete this strategic rollout with your team?
My hope is that every kid is experiencing PYD, every staff member is implementing PYD, and every site, I have 3 school sites, that every site is feeling the PYD. Some staff do it already naturally in some areas, not all 6, but the goal is that all 6 of those components, they're feeling confident and being able to apply those so that every kid, every family feels it, hears it, sees it when they're on our campuses.
You mentioned that your site leads, site supervisors, am I correct, are going to roll this out within their programs. What upskilling or support do the site leads need, or what have you, what environment or supports have you created for them to support them to be able to activate this?
Yeah, so before rolling it out, we have monthly site supervisor meetings. And so this was one of the topics, was showing them what the calendar looked like, going through the resources with them so that they could look at it, ask questions before they were in charge of rolling it out to their staff. And then also part of that was during our check-ins, I'm like, how is it going? What do you guys like? Because I also wanted their feedback. This is something that I'm piloting. So this is what I think works, but also with them doing it on site, I wanted their true, candid, honest feedback. And so being able to ask them what they liked, was it able or was it easily applicable? Were you hit any bumps in the road? And so really getting their honest feedback too, so I can make tweaks for the other school sites when it gets piloted in the new year.
I love that because you're sharing power with your staff. They are the staff that are going to actually probably activate the plan, be the face of the plan, be observing for these behaviours to see if they're actually happening. So it's a fantastic strategy to start that co-creation with them. What early signs of culture change are you seeing at the site that you are rolling this out with currently?
Yeah, the site, they're just now going through their second Super 6, so they're not too far into it quite yet. But when I first went out to the site and explained it to all of the staff, they were all super eager. They were all already on board. So that was easy for me. I didn't have to convince anyone that PYD is great and that we should be doing those things. So I think that base culture with the staff was already there. Maybe from the mid-year and the before year trainings where we just talk about it. But I think they were ready for it. They're like, how do we get this into our programs? So I think that culture with the staff was already there. And I think with the students, seeing the warm hellos and the staff really trying, like as 10 different kids are coming through the doorway and they're just being greeted. And, you know, some of the kids like look back and they're like, oh, like, hey, Miss Diane. And so I think seeing that has been really cool already with that culture with the kids.
Awesome. And staff get really busy. There's 14 kids to a staff sometimes. And it's really hard when you're signing kids in or signing them out that you're focused on maybe 13 other kids or somebody else that needs your attention. So it really is about bringing it to their attention, that it is important, that it's a practice that should be implemented and embedded daily. Because again, things can pull them away from the lens very easily. There is a misconception sometimes that we are already doing positive youth development, and we are positively developing youth, but in terms of the actual positive youth development framework and the elements that are in that, sometimes there's that perception we already do all of this because we develop youth and we have positive programming. How do you address that with staff, and how do you help them understand the difference between doing something occasionally versus that consistent practice and the benefits of that?
Yeah, when I went out the first day, I explained, like, I don't want this to come across that we aren't doing those things, because I do see each and every one of you doing elements of PYD. But I really focused on the intentionality and the consistency of it. And I asked them, I was like, do we do PYD every single day and with every student that walks through our doors? And they answered, they were like, no, because some days, you know, you get pulled away, or you have all 14 kids trying to ask you something, and it just sort of slips away in that moment. And so they were able to answer it there. And honestly, so I was like, okay, so that's why we're doing these things, is to really keep it in front of us and make it intentional every day, and with every student.
It's awesome. And one of the biggest contributors to this is self-awareness and staff being able to reflect on their practice. So having that self-awareness, like, no, we realize we are not doing this and we could do this better, is the first step in terms of seeing the behaviors that we need to change. So that is fantastic that they are motivated and they are on board. What areas of strength do you see and practices that are strong, and where do you see the areas where we could have stronger alignment, or that we are going to have to support stronger?
Yeah, I think one of our strong points, is expanding interests, and sharing power too. Minimum days, our sites run clubs, and so the kids help create the clubs, what clubs interest them, so that the staff can sort of build that curriculum around it. And sometimes kids are leading like the dance clubs and they come up with their own choreography. So I think those are two strong points. And I think an area of growth for us is, definitely some engaging authentically. Some of our staff do it really well, and others it's more transactional. So trying to be really intentional with that. But yeah, I think that's a good area of growth, and one that I think also those small things go a long way with the warm goodbyes and the, doing a 4-H greeting every day. That those are some small wins we can make right away.
Absolutely. And the small wins build up over time and they help with some of the bigger, harder ones. Once we build that environment, some of the like the share power elements will get start slightly easier. Um, okay, so expectations versus reality after training. When you first learned about PYD and staff completed this PYD training, and I know your after school sites they've had quite a bit of exposure to PYD, but what was the reality been from when they finished training to what their practice is?
Yeah, you know, the knowledge was there, the information was shared, but it wasn't being applied. And so really just wanting the staff to apply it. You know, I'd go out and site and it'd be like, we just had this training like 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, why aren't we saying hi to every kid? Why are like kids not, we're just saying, okay, Johnny, you're going home today. And there was none of that warm goodbyes. And I was like, we just talked about this. And so really just putting it, you know, putting it on this focus calendar that today, this is what we're focusing on. So, you know, obviously maintaining all the safety aspects, but if you do anything today, just make sure you have a warm goodbye when a kid goes home. And just really keeping it in front of our staff so it doesn't get forgotten.
I think you raise a really good point, and we all engage in learning experiences and opportunities for additional training. But sometimes we get really, really busy and then we just revert back into how we do things. So I think you raise a really good point in terms of like we can train, but that's just the knowledge and the information. But like the skills and the transfer of that knowledge into practice is really where the work becomes. For the directors and the site leads, embedding that into practice. So this PYD strategy, how do you see this supporting the social emotional learning needs of children and youth, family engagement, maybe behavioural support, staff morale, even overall program quality? How do you see the PYD strategy supporting that 360?
Yeah, PYD, especially my first train of thought is with that behavior support. A lot of times, our students are maybe having a challenging moment, a challenging day, and it's a behavior that frustrates the staff. And our staff are the ones that are reacting to it versus responding to it, and they're not really giving, the youth an opportunity to share maybe why they're feeling that way or why they're acting that way in that moment. And so having PYD and being able to, you know, share that power and have the student lead the conversation of why they're going through this moment at this time, it can help give our staff a perspective that they didn't have versus just all right, well, you need to go over here and take a break. And when you're ready, you can come back in. Because that's not really supporting our youth. That's just putting the problem to the side and then bringing it back. And so having PYD to be able to let our kids have those conversations and share how they're feeling, and be able to engage authentically with, if a student's coming from school and let's say they had a hard day at school and now they're coming to us and our staff don't even say hi in that moment, that day's not going to even have a chance to turn around and get better. So having PYD definitely supports in that aspect. And I think, when PYD is in place, our program is already at a higher quality than it was before, because our kids are being engaged with authentically. Their goals are being helped getting met, and they're learning about things they're actually interested in and not just coming to a program that they don't necessarily want to be at or not feeling welcomed and having a place like they belong.
I love that. And there's definitely been a move away from the transactional relationship building strategies, or a trend away from the correction and redirection into that. Let's try and work through this together as opposed to fixing it. I love that. All of these little things will build that PYD environment, which ultimately will have that better outcomes for children and youth, especially in relation to their mental health and well-being. You're also responsible for camp. So I'm really interested now to see what are you thinking? What is your vision? What is your strategy for how you will embed PYD practices into camp this year? Because it's a very different environment, and you have less touch points for your staff. In terms of that training and build up, we also have them for a very short period of time if they're seasonal. So talk me through what your ideas are for taking some of this amazing strategy that you have here after school, and how are you going to drip feed some of this into camp?
Yeah. Last summer, or starting with spring break camp, I piloted the Feedback Friday that you had suggested. And so I took that into summer camp as well. And I think that was really great information to learn from the kids, the things that they liked, they didn't like, and be able to, take that information and sort of apply it the next week, or things that we could fix that they didn't like. And so having that intentional thing to do every Friday is something I want to do every day. So like the weekly intentions poster on the website, really having a focus for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so that it's something that is small, but they can do every day, and just making it a daily intention. And that way, switch it up per week, because some of our campers we have the whole summer, some we only see once per summer. And so being able to have a different intention every Monday or every Tuesday, but that way it's still being implemented just in a different way than our after school programs.
And it sounds very much that it's a practical practice. It's a practice that you're given staff to do with the youth that they're engaging with. I love that. Maybe you will come on after summer and share how that is. Maybe just share now a storytelling moment. When has PYD made a difference? Share a moment when you can truly say that PYD has made a difference, either for a youth that you've been working with or supporting, or a staff member, or a tone of the program, or a segment of a program day.
Yeah. Speaking about that Feedback Friday, it was during, I think, spring or summer camp, but it was spring camp because I was the one who was piloting it then. And so this Friday, I went to the camp and asked something that they liked, they didn't like, and something that made them excited throughout the week. And it was a 5-year-old camper, and she said she did not like the drive-through drop-off that we did. And I was like, oh, why is that? And the reason for our drive-through drop-off is just at Davis, we have very limited parking. So we make this as a convenience for parents. They don't have to spend 30 minutes trying to find a spot just to drop their kids off. And so this 5-year-old had shared with me that when she goes to school, her mom or dad walks her up to her classroom door, and she gets to give them a hug or a high five or a kiss before she goes on with her day. And she felt she was just being shoved out of the door and then thrown into camp right away. And so it just broke my heart. But then knowing that's how she felt, not only for myself, but I was able to understand maybe that's a perspective other of our campers are experiencing, and being able to know, okay, when these campers are coming up and they're a little thrown off or they're not quite ready for the day, it might be that the drive-through drop-off was a contributing factor. If they are walked up to their classroom every day and now they're just in this whole new environment and just sort of thrown out the door, said bye, and parents drive away. And then I was also able to share that with mom, just to let her know, like, hey, this is how your child felt about drive-through drop-off. So if you're able to find a parking spot, it might make her feel better and more comfortable coming into camp. And just because I also want to share, like, she's coming into camp already feeling a certain way, and so she's has these blockers up because her day was thrown off. And so I think with that, hearing what this child had to say and how she felt about a part of our camp was something mom was choosing for convenience, but I was able to gain another perspective and also share that with mom. So
Oh, that really, like, it's sad and emotional to hear that, but it also makes me happy because if we had never asked that question, you would never have known that that child was extremely anxious and dysregulated starting her day because she just felt she was getting pushed out of the car, as opposed to what she's familiar with, which is like a very loving, soft handover. Um, I think sometimes we can't control what the structures looks like, but if we identify how our youth are feeling in our programs, we can support them so that we can help that, like, that transitional piece from the car, so that they can center themselves and be a little bit more regulated, or that we know that they need a little bit of space and time. Like, what do we need to do, or how can I help you? How can we make this better? So that's not like drip fed through their whole day, that we get to help them like deal with those emotions and then move on.
mhm.
Oh, that makes my heart so happy to hear that A, strategies are working, but B, they're being effective for the youth. Okay. How are you weaving this into your daily operations? We spoke a little bit about like the training. How else can you weave this into your daily operations?
Daily operations wise, for me personally, when I'm having conversations with my staff or the supervisors that are leading these school sites, I try to, weave these elements in and give them a voice. For example, all three of our school sites operate very differently because I think that's something I wanted to do with share power. I didn't want them all to be cookie cutter sites. So letting them, pick what snack they're going to order for the month or what curriculum they're going to choose to lead that month. So all of our sites look and feel very different, but they're all totally fine in that way. So I think giving those little bits and pieces where I can, to share power with the staff and the supervisors, giving them the opportunity, and then also I think managing goals during our check-ins. We talk about long-term, short-term goals. How can I support you? And a lot of our check-ins and conversations they're not structured with an agenda. It's more just an open dialogue for them to tell me where they're at and how can I best support them. So I think those are ways that it's easy to weave into my daily operations with my staff team.
I love that because what we're beginning to realize is PYD isn't just something that we do with the kids that we work with. It really is something that we build that culture, and the way we build that culture is from leadership modeling these behaviors, embedding these behaviors when we have any interactions, whether that be with staff, parents, adults, youth. Why is it important for you that directors are consistent and intentional in modeling these behaviors?
If our staff team isn't seeing the leadership model these behaviors, why would they want to in turn model those behaviors with their staff? So I think it's really important that it trickles down from the top and not just me expecting you to do something when I'm not even doing it myself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you have to think about the behaviors that you are exhibiting in line with the framework, or do you feel they're coming very, very naturally, or do you start to reflect on your interactions and think, oh, did I really engage with the framework, or did I engage as intentionally as I could? So does it come as a proactive thought or as a more of a self-reflection, and then how do you CQI that to change in your additional follow-up conversations, I guess?
Yeah, I think some of them come naturally, but engaging authentically does not come naturally to me. I very much have to consciously think when I'm going into a conversation with staff, like, okay, ask some open ended questions and how was your weekend? And try to build those more personal connections and have that rapport. That one does not come naturally to me at all. And so that's something that I very consciously have to think of in the moment, where I think like the sharing power or expanding interest, those might come a little more naturally to me in that aspect.
I love that. And I love also that you touched on that your sites have their own freedom, I guess, within the framework, as long as they're following protocol and licensing and safety, but freedom to like carve out whatever program, curriculum, clubs, whatever that looks like, snacks. But I guess then the PYD piece, this will be a consistent approach that will, you would hope to feel the same as you observe any of your sites. So are you hoping that that will keep some consistency, or you will see the same consistency in staff across all of your sites in relation to PYD?
Yeah, in relation to PYD, I hope they all take something away from it, and that I can hear it, see it, feel it when I'm on the site. Doesn't necessarily mean they all have to do the 4-H greeting the same exact way. Not every group is going to have to do a high five, but at least if that component is there and I can see it and recognize it, it's totally fine with me. However, they choose to take that PYD and implement it, as long as it's being implemented and our students are feeling that from them.
When you've been at sites, we talk about like PYD can be a vibe. You can sometimes feel the connection between a staff and a young person. And I can see it and feel it really, really strongly. When you're at site now, are you attuned to that? Like, can you see where there's that vibe happening between staff and youth? And
Yeah,
can you touch upon,
absolutely.
I know that young person is connected to that staff. You can just feel it.
Yep. Yeah, you can totally feel it. And we do have to use subs sometimes, and they're even internal subs, so they're staff members from a different school site, so they know why policy and all of that. But if they're on a campus they're not normally at, and then I'm there that day, it's like you can just tell, like, the staff is there, the kids are responding to them, but it's not the same as when I was there yesterday. And there's staff that has built that rapport and has that connection with them. They weren't interacting the same way. They weren't having those same conversations. So you can totally feel the vibe when you're on campuses.
What advice would you have for other directors who have had exposure to the PYD trainings? What, yeah, what would you suggest in terms of how do you move this from a training into a culture?
Start small. Some of these things are really easy to implement right off the bat. It doesn't have to be this grand focus calendar per se, where you're focusing on something for 3 weeks. But even if you can just, like, if you have a Teams message or a chat with all of your site supervisors or staff team, this is what we started with, was sending a PYD tip of the day. So just, here's a tip for today, try it out. Let us know how it works. And so being able to start small, and then you can scale up once you're feeling a little more comfortable and confident in all things PYD.
How long did you think it took yourself to wrap your head around this, and that PYD is consistent behaviors, and that it's going to take a lot of work to actually get us there? Because it's very interesting that you said start really small with the staff, like a tip of the day, really small, really focus, something that they can execute. Because we do not want to overwhelm, and if we go too big, it gets lost in the sauce a little bit. So, how long did it take you to get your head around PYD is this big thing, but it doesn't have to be this big thing? And why did you go so small to start with, like tip of the day?
Yeah. When you first had, it was a training that you and Tiana had done, I think like a year and a half ago or something. I was like, I need you guys to come out and share all of this with our team. I was like, I want to implement it. I wanted it now. And after talking with you, and you're like, we actually need to start from the top down and not with the frontline staff. So that way it trickles down. So that's when my brain started going, and I'm like, how do I get this in my programs? And so trying to find all the resources I could to make it manageable for our team. And even myself, going on the website, I was like, there is a ton of information and resources here. And so that's when I started to, just educate myself and read through and look at all of the resources that were available. And, if I just sent this link to my staff, they would probably not even know where to start, just because there's so much content on it. And so that's when I started just going through it, and I was like, okay, this is totally doable for our staff team. How can I plug this in? And so that's when I think starting small, because if I was just like, oh my gosh, look at all this amazing stuff, it would probably just get lost, or be overwhelming for some. So starting really small and sending tips of the day were found on the website, or from the resources. And then from there, I started taking more, finding external videos to plug in, to really focus just on one thing per day.
I love that. When you were initially expecting we would just come and do this with frontline staff, how did you feel when it was not something that we were going to activate at that given time because we were focused on leadership? And what was your initial thoughts about that, and how has that changed ever since?
Yeah, I was like, you're the PYD expert. Like, I need it to come directly from you. But then after having more conversations with you, I was like, that totally makes sense, because if your frontline staff is bought in, but then leadership isn't, and then it's not really going to go anywhere, and there's no one to really hold them accountable or keep this expectation in front of them. And so looking at it now, I think it was great that you pushed it back on me and said that we need to start here so that it can trickle down, versus starting with the front line, because it won't necessarily trickle up if you're not on board with it.
And we really need, it lives and breathes. You're the director of the program. You manage the program, you support the staff teams. So it's really important that it's held by directors within programs. We can support any which way. There's tools, there's resources we can support with additional training. But initially we need directors at capacity, so that when you are on site, you see the behaviors, you start to identify behaviors that are PYD aligned, that are not PYD aligned. So we can't rush that, and we can't have staff operating in ways that directors can't support. So I'm really glad you touched on that, and I'm really glad we've come 360. And I'm really excited to see where what the results of this are with your staff, or even the feedback from the staff, like the staff that you've trained initially or started the rollout with. What is their feedback? How are they feeling about this? What are their comments?
Yeah, one of the areas that they did not like was the role play. And I wasn't there the day they did the role play. But then when I was chatting with the supervisor, they were like, yeah, they feel really uncomfortable. They didn't like the role play. And, initially I was like, okay, I'll take it off of the calendar for the other 2 school sites, because they don't like it. But then I was like, why didn't they like it? Was it the questions that were being asked? And the supervisor just shared, they felt uncomfortable doing role play with their peers. So then I, in turn, was able to be like, well, that's challenging growth, right? This is something that not everyone feels comfortable with, but it's 5 minutes of our day that we can push ourselves out of this comfort zone. So ultimately, I left it on the calendar for the other 2 school sites to do as one of their little micro practices during huddle time.
What was the role play scenarios about? Talk me through that.
I believe it was for promoting peer bonds. And so I broke down a segment of the day. So at snack time, one staff was going to act as the staff, one was going to be the youth, and how can we promote peer bonds during snack time? How can we do it during a transition? How can we do it during outside play or homework time? And so they had to act it out between the staff and pretend to be the child. And the staff was going to go up to them and introduce them to someone else at snack, or oh my gosh, you guys have the same snack, and just sort of form those connections. But they felt uncomfortable acting with each other.
And I guess everybody responds differently, but what's really cool is they shared that and they felt it was a safe space to say, we actually felt really uncomfortable and we did not like that. And I think that's what's really important, because sometimes we do things, it's like, but do they have that safe space to honestly then tell you that they didn't like something or they didn't want to do it again? And that's what you got. So that's what, when we talk about creating these safety spaces, where people are advocating for what they like or what they don't like, that's awesome. What tools do you think were the most important? You mentioned the website and a ton of stuff on the website, but was there one in specific or anything that you're like, that's where I would start, or that is my reference guide, or that's the one thing that I literally will not be without?
I think it is, I don't know what it's titled on the website, but it's like the PYD aligned practices. And so it breaks down, it says like engage authentically, and then it has like all these different examples of how we're able to do that, and different ideas of how you can incorporate those into your programs. So I think those ones were super easy to read, go through, and then pull from ideas and create examples for our teams.
Awesome. Well, we're glad they're being used, and that they're useful. And the website will grow. As we've done additional observations, we're noticing things that we could strengthen and we could align more. So all of these resources have really been developed to support these practices, and we will keep adding more to that as we go. So hopefully you have some more stuff for a next rollout. Okay, let's do this rapid fire round. Let's have some fun. What's one word you hope youth use to describe your program?
Engaging.
One Super 6 practice you want your team known for?
Engaging authentically.
A Super 6 practice you personally want to grow in?
Engaging authentically.
A Super 6 practice you think youth notice first?
Share power.
A staff behavior that instantly makes you smile?
Warm goodbyes.
PYD tool that you couldn't live without?
The website.
A phrase that captures your leadership philosophy in 3 words?
Lead with purpose.
Oh, I love that. What made me smile is when you said engage authentically about 3 times there. I thought you were probably going to say it again, but I think it just made me realize it's the fundamental element that we need to get right before we do any of the work. And if we don't engage authentically, we can't really share power. We're not supporting that team growth or the environment, because kids are not feeling that sense of belonging and that sense of safety, the psychological safety. So I'm so glad that you said that was one of the most important ones for yourself, for your team, because I think really that is the foundation of the work. So if we get that right, the rest of the work will follow and will be a lot easier in terms of implementation. Okay, so we talked a lot about moving this culture from training into practice. If a director only had 5 minutes tomorrow, what could they do that would genuinely make a difference?
Look at the website and go through all of the resources that are there, and really gain a deeper knowledge of PYD. And there's different videos and printouts, and just really explore everything the website has to offer.
And if they had 30 minutes, which sometimes I'm sure you get, to deepen your knowledge, what would you recommend?
Definitely print out those resources, start sharing them with your teams. Once you're exploring the website through that 5 minutes, and then you have 30 is to really dive in a little deeper. And if you haven't already, watch the videos, and really print out those resources and start sharing them with your teams. Even if you don't necessarily know where to start, maybe someone on your team has an idea where to start, but if they don't know these resources exist, if you don't share them. So I think using that 30 minutes to at least start using those resources and utilizing them.
I love that. And we hoped when we developed tools and resources for the website that they would be used, and not just as a page or as a poster, but really to support that practice. So it really It motivates me to keep adding materials to the website and to create materials for the website, because you've just highlighted how important that it is as your hub for all things PYD. Thank you for sharing those practical and powerful, actionable steps that all staff can do. We really do know that culture shifts don't happen in the big moments, they happen in the small, intentional moments, done consistently and over time. So for our listeners, here's your challenge for this week. Maybe pick an interaction tomorrow where you feel you can intentionally engage authentically with a young person. Or in your next team huddle, start by asking, where did you see PYD show up really strong today? Start building that shared language and dripping in those little tidbits for the day. Kaylene, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all the work that you've done every day to create those safe, supportive spaces where youth are thriving. Thank you for your team, for their motivation and their commitment to working with you in rolling out this strategic plan. I'm very excited to see where it goes. Thank you so much for everything that you've done. And we will see you next time on the Positive Youth Development Podcast, where we bring you more stories from the field, building a community where youth can thrive.
Thanks for having me, Jacqui.
You're very welcome.